My name is Janice, and I'm 20 years old. Ever since I could remember, I had a burning desire to be independent. Getting accepted to college on a full scholarship felt like my hard work was finally paying off. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, books, you name it. But there was still one hurdle left: finding a place to live. That's when my mom, in her usual solution-oriented fashion, proposed something that seemed perfect at the time. "Janice, I've been thinking," she said one evening as we sat in our kitchen. "You know that apartment I got from your grandmother a few years ago? Why don't you rent it? I'll give you a good rate, much lower than anything you'd find nearby." I trusted her, and after doing some research, it seemed like a no-brainer. The rent she was asking was nearly half of what similar apartments in the area cost. Sure, I'd need a job to cover it, but it was doable. "Okay, that sounds great," I replied, feeling relieved. But my mom wasn't done. "You'll need to sign a proper lease agreement," she added, pulling out papers she'd already prepared. I always do things by the book. Within the week, I found a job at a cafe near campus. It wasn't glamorous, but between my classes and the long hours of work, I was managing. Sure, I was exhausted most days, but the satisfaction of paying my own way and handling things on my own made it all worthwhile. My days became a blur of classes, work, and late-night study sessions. I was on a routine, and for the most part, it was working. But then, everything changed on a Thursday evening. I remember it vividly. I'd just finished a grueling shift at the cafe. All I wanted was to collapse on my couch and maybe catch up on some mindless TV before tackling my homework. But as I opened the door to my apartment, I froze. There, sprawled across my couch like she owned the place, was my sister Anna. 2 large suitcases sat next to her, and she was scrolling through her phone with a look of utter relaxation on her face. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still standing in the doorway, my voice unsure. Anna barely looked up. "Oh, hey, I'm moving in with you. Mom said it was fine." I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly pulled out my phone and called Mom. My hands shook as I waited for her to pick up. "Mom, what's going on? Anna says she's moving in here. Is she going to pay rent too?" I asked, my voice tight with confusion. Her response hit me like a punch to the gut. "Are you crazy, Janice? What kind of stupid question is that? Of course Anna's not paying rent. You'll keep paying what you've been paying, and she'll live there for free." "What? That's not fair. If she's living here, she should pay half the rent." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my frustration boiling over. But Mom wasn't having it. "Listen carefully, Janice. That apartment belongs to me, and I decide who pays what. If you don't like it, you can move out right now." Her ultimatum stung. I was so angry, so betrayed, but I didn't have a choice. I looked at other rental listings, but everything was way out of my price range. So, swallowing my pride, I stayed. I accepted the situation, even though it felt like a punch to my gut. Living with Anna was nothing short of a nightmare. She had no regard for anyone else, and every day felt like living with a whirlwind. I'd wake up to find every light in the apartment on. She'd leave them on all night, in the kitchen, in the living room, you name it. "Anna, could you please remember to turn off the lights when you leave a room? The electricity bill?" I started one morning, trying to keep my voice calm, but she just brushed me off. "Stop being so uptight." She cut me off, never bothering to look up from her phone. "It's not that big of a deal." The lights were the least of my problems. The real issue was her bathroom habits. Anna would lock herself in there for hours, taking endless baths while chatting with her friends on the phone. The sound of running water was constant, like an annoying soundtrack to my already stressful life. One evening, while I was studying for an exam, I could hear her splashing and laughing from behind the bathroom door. The water had been running for more than 2 hours. "Hey, Anna," I called out, knocking on the door. "You've been in there forever. Do you realize how much water you're wasting?" Her voice, muffled by the door, came back far too cheerfully. "Chill out, sis. I'm having a spa day. Mom says I can do whatever I want." I couldn't believe it. 3 hours later, the water finally stopped. The utility bill that came a few days later nearly made me faint. It was double what I usually paid. Double. I confronted Anna that evening as she sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone at full volume. "We need to talk about the utility bills," I said, holding up the paper. "They've doubled since you moved in. You need to be more conscious of the water and electricity usage." She finally looked up, a smirk playing on her lips. "Or what?" My blood began to boil. "Or you'll need to find somewhere else to live." That got her attention. She shot up, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" I stood my ground. "You're not paying rent. You're freeloading here, and I'm not putting up with it anymore." For a moment, there was silence between us. Then suddenly, she exploded. "Pack your things!" she yelled. "This isn't your apartment!" The room seemed to freeze. But then, with all the spite in the world, Anna began throwing her things into her suitcases, knocking over furniture and making as much noise as possible. Finally, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that the windows rattled. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, just as my phone began to ring. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I knew this was coming, but my hands still shook when I answered. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was shrill and angry. "Mom, she's been living here for free, and you told me I had to keep paying rent. That's not fair." But she didn't care. "Pack your things and get out," she spat. "Or I'll double your rent. Your choice." Everything inside me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. "You know what?" I shot back, barely able to keep my voice steady with rage. "I'd rather pay 5 times as much somewhere else than spend another minute in this insane situation." Before she could respond, I hung up. I grabbed my suitcase and started throwing clothes in, not bothering to fold anything. The anger surged through me as I gathered my things. Then, as I pulled books off my bookcase, one of them slipped from my hands, falling to the floor. As I bent to pick it up, something caught my eye. It was a piece of paper fluttering to the ground. I unfolded it and froze. It was my grandmother's will. And as I read through it, everything I had been blindly ignoring fell into place. The apartment, my apartment, had been left to me all along. That was when everything began to make sense. I sank to the floor, still holding the will in my hands. My heart pounded in my chest, and everything around me felt like it was spinning. The reality of what I was holding hit me like a ton of bricks. My grandmother had left this apartment to me. Not my mom, not Anna, me. I stared at the legal document in shock, unable to wrap my head around it. It was all so clear now. I could hear my mother's voice echoing in my mind from years ago, right after my grandmother's funeral. I had been sitting in our living room surrounded by family when Mom made the announcement. She'd said with such confidence and sincerity that my grandmother had left everything to her. All the property, all the money, everything. And I believed her. I didn't question it at the time, but now it all made sense. I remembered the awkward feeling I had back then when I raised my hand timidly and asked, "But Mom, why didn't Grandma leave anything to us? To Anna and me?" Her face had twisted in that way it always did when she was hiding something, half pity, half irritation. "Janice, these things are complicated," she had told me, the words dripping with condescension. "It was your grandmother's decision, and we need to respect that. You just have to accept it. Accept it." Those words had stayed with me for years, always lingering in the back of my mind. And I did. I accepted it. I had no reason not to believe her. But now, with the will in my hands, it felt like I had been duped. I'd watched as Anna got everything. Designer clothes, the latest iPhone, a shopping spree across Europe. Mom and Anna had gone on that mother-daughter bonding trip to Paris and Milan while I stayed home, working a summer job at the local grocery store. At the time, I thought they were just living it up. I never once questioned where the money for all of it was coming from. But now, it was all starting to fall into place. The money they were spending, the vacations they went on, the gifts Anna received, it was all from my inheritance. It wasn't just hidden from me. They'd made me pay for it, for the apartment that had always been mine. I'd been paying rent, utilities, everything, for my own property. I could almost hear my mom's voice in my head now, the way she'd always insisted that we do everything by the book. Every time I handed her that rent money, she would smile and say, "You're so responsible, Janice. I'm glad you're learning the value of hard work." And I believed her. I thought I was just being a responsible adult. But no, I was being played. The bitter irony of it all hit me like a slap in the face. I could hear her words again, the way she had insisted that I sign that formal lease agreement. "Everything needs to be documented properly," she'd said. "We need to do this right." She was so particular about the paperwork, so careful about doing things the right way. But when it came to telling me the truth about my grandmother's will, she'd conveniently forgotten all about it. I let out a bitter laugh as I sat there in my apartment, surrounded by the silence of betrayal. The apartment that I had been paying for, that I had been told, wasn't mine. I held up my phone and began to take pictures of the will. I made sure every word was clear, every detail captured. Then I sent the pictures to my mother. It wasn't long before the dreaded read receipt appeared. She'd seen it. I sat there, waiting, watching those 3 little dots pop up on my screen. She was probably scrambling to come up with some excuse, some way to talk her way out of this. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as the dots appeared and disappeared. Let her squirm. An hour passed. Then, finally, my phone rang. I took a deep breath before answering. "Janice, sweetie." Her voice was artificially calm, the kind of tone she always used when trying to smooth things over. "This isn't what you think." "Oh, really?" I cut her off, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Because I think it's exactly what I think. You've been lying to me for years. About the apartment, about the money, about everything." She kept talking as though I hadn't said a word. "I've been meaning to tell you about this for so long. I just never found the right moment. But since you've found out, you can have the apartment. It's yours now. Let's just forget about all of this and start fresh." "Start fresh?" I scoffed. "You want me to forget everything? Forget that you hid my inheritance from me? Forget that I've been paying rent for something that was mine all along?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice changed, the sweetness gone. "Janice, please, don't be unreasonable. We've done so much for you. You wouldn't sue your own mother, would you?" "After everything you've done to me?" I shot back, my anger bubbling up again. "You took my inheritance, made me pay rent on my own property, and now you're trying to throw me out? Oh, I would sue. Don't think I won't." I hung up on her before she could say anything else. I wasn't interested in hearing any more of her excuses. I opened my banking app and began scrolling through the transaction history. 23 months of rent payments, each one meticulously documented. I had always kept good records, something Mom had always praised me for. Now, it felt like a curse. I had been paying for something that was never supposed to cost me a penny. With the rent payments adding up, I realized I had saved enough money for a lawyer. A good one. I called the law office the next day, and a few days later, I was sitting across from Miss Roberts, who was reviewing all the documents I'd brought with me. "This is pretty straightforward," she said, after looking over everything. Her expression was a mixture of sympathy and professional interest. "Your grandmother left you the apartment in her will. Your mom had no legal right to collect rent from you, or anyone else for that matter. So what can I do?" I asked, leaning forward. My voice was steady now, but inside my stomach churned. "You're entitled to compensation," Miss Roberts said. "Not just for the 23 months you've been paying rent, but also for the 2 years before that when your mom was renting it out to other people. And we can pursue interest charges too. Your parents essentially used an interest-free loan of your money for almost 4 years. I sat there in stunned silence as she calculated everything, breaking down each month of rent payments, adding in the rent from the previous tenants, and calculating the market rates at the time. When she slid the final piece of paper toward me, I had to blink twice to process the number. $60,000, she said, looking at me over her glasses. "And that's without interest. If we pursue interest, it'll be more." I stared at the number, feeling both nauseous and vindicated. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The truth had come out, and now I was going to make them pay. After Miss Roberts left me with the final paperwork, I sat in her office for a few more minutes, just staring at the documents in front of me. It still felt surreal. I had been robbed, not just of my inheritance, but of the trust and respect I had given my family for years. The number on the paper, $60,000, felt like a slap in the face, but at the same time, it was a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had proof now. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. The next morning, I took a deep breath and dialed my mom's number again. Her name popped up on my screen and I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. But I quickly pushed that feeling aside. This wasn't about me feeling guilty or second-guessing myself. This was about what was right. What she did to me wasn't right. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the years of lies, the manipulation, and the way she treated me as if I didn't matter. "Mom," I said when she picked up. I could tell she was nervous too. Her voice was shaky, but she wasn't going to pull me into another emotional game. "We need to talk. I'm coming by the apartment today. I'm bringing the documents, the ownership papers. We're going to fix this." I heard a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically feel the tension radiating through the phone. "I'll be there," she finally said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. When she arrived that afternoon, I could hear her key turning in the lock. The door creaked open and she stepped inside, clutching a manila envelope like it was a lifeline. She tried to put on a smile, but it was strained, like she knew everything had already unraveled. "I brought the ownership papers," she said, trying to sound calm. "Everything's here to transfer the apartment to your name. We can put this behind us, Janice. I know I made a mistake, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. Let's just move forward, okay?" She spread the papers across the kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed the lease agreement so many months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I looked down at the papers she was pushing toward me, the ownership papers, the same ones that had been hidden from me for so long. "Mom," I said, my voice cold, "I know what this is about. This isn't some kind of peace offering. You're trying to act like this was just a mistake, but it wasn't. You knew exactly what you were doing." Her smile faltered, and she reached out, trying to push the papers closer to me. "I'm sorry, Janice. Really. I didn't mean for things to get this out of hand." I didn't even let her finish. I slid another piece of paper across the table, the demand letter my lawyer had prepared, the one that made it clear I wasn't going to just forgive and forget. "You have 2 weeks to pay back the $60,000 you owe me," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. I wasn't going to break down. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into backing down. "And I want every penny, all of it." Her eyes widened as she read the letter. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she jumped up so quickly that her chair crashed to the floor and her hands began to shake. "You ungrateful little witch," she screamed, her voice shrill with fury. "How dare you do this to your own mother?" The sound of her yelling echoed through the apartment, so loud and intense that I swore I could hear the plaster on the walls shudder. It was like something out of a horror movie, the anger, the venom she was spewing. I stayed seated, as calm as I could muster. This was what I had been waiting for. She could scream all she wanted. It wasn't going to change anything. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "You can scream all you want, but it won't change the fact that you stole from me. You took my inheritance, made me pay rent on my own property, and tried to throw me out when I wouldn't let Anna freeload. Either you pay what you owe, or I file a lawsuit. Think about it. Fraud charges, legal fees, your reputation, your choice." For a long moment, she just stared at the letter, her face twisted in anger and disbelief. She didn't even seem to know how to respond. Finally, she stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her with such force that it shook the walls. I could hear her stomping down the hallway, still screaming. I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I thought I'd have a quiet evening to myself. But I was wrong. The phone started ringing almost immediately. The first call came from my father. His voice was harsh, full of disbelief. "How could you do this to us, Janice?" he demanded. "After everything we've done for you, after all we've given you? You're ungrateful. A selfish, ungrateful child." I laughed bitterly. "Ungrateful? Really? You're calling me ungrateful? You've been stealing from me for years and now I'm supposed to feel guilty?" He stammered, trying to defend himself, but I didn't care. I hung up on him, and a few minutes later, Anna's name flashed on my phone. "You're ruining everything," she wailed, her voice desperate. "Mom and Dad have to pay you back, and now they won't have money to pay for my college. Is that what you want? To destroy my future?" I rolled my eyes, unable to hide my frustration. "Your future isn't my problem, Anna. Maybe you should try getting a job, like I did when I was in school. Hard work, saving money, it's a novel concept." The calls didn't stop. For the next few days, it was like I couldn't escape the onslaught. My parents took turns calling, lecturing me about family loyalty and respect. Anna played the victim, trying to guilt-trip me at every turn. They were all on the attack, trying to manipulate me into backing down. But I stood my ground. I knew they were desperate. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't have to let them control me anymore. A week went by, and the calls didn't stop. Mom and Dad alternated between yelling, crying, and trying to manipulate me into dropping the whole thing. But I wasn't going to back down. I was done with their lies, their manipulation, and their constant attempts to control me. Then, on the 8th day, my father called again, but this time, there was a shift in his tone. "We need to meet, Janice," he said, his voice heavy with something I couldn't quite place. "Can you give us a month instead of 2 weeks?" I paused, thinking it over. The lawyer had advised me that a month was still reasonable. I was in control now, and I wasn't going to let them bully me into a quick resolution. "Fine," I said, my voice firm. 1 month, not a day more." I hung up, and the next 4 weeks were strangely quiet. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more screaming. It was almost as if they were planning something, but I didn't care. I focused on my own life. I went to class, worked my shifts at the cafe, and tried to put the whole mess out of my mind. Exactly 1 month later, I checked my bank account. There it was, $60,000, transferred in full. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel anything other than a deep, exhausted sense of relief. It was over. Finally. The money was in my account. I couldn't believe it. After all the stress, the fights, the manipulation, I was finally free. Or at least, that's what I tried to tell myself. But the feeling wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. The satisfaction was there, sure, but so was the bitter aftertaste of everything I had been through to get to this point. 3 months had passed since that day when the $60,000 appeared in my account. My life had returned to a strange version of normal. I still worked at the cafe, still went to classes, and I still lived in my grandmother's apartment. My apartment. It was a strange kind of freedom. But there were moments, usually late at night, when I'd think about everything that had happened. The anger would flood back, sharp and unexpected. A few days ago, Aunt Carol called me. She'd always been the family gossip, but I couldn't help but appreciate it this time. She was the first one to give me the full picture of what had been happening behind the scenes. "They had to take out a loan to pay you back," Aunt Carol said, her voice a mix of concern and fascination. "They're really struggling with the payments now." I sat on the couch, staring at the wall as she continued. "Anna's not in college anymore. They can't afford her tuition, so she's just sitting around at home, complaining about how you ruined her life." I couldn't help but laugh at that. Ruined her life. She's the one who's been living off everyone else, expecting things to be handed to her. Maybe it's time she learned how to stand on her own feet. Aunt Carol fell silent for a moment, then asked cautiously, "Do you feel bad about it, though? About the loan?" I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I felt nothing. My parents had manipulated me for so long, and Anna had never known a hard day in her life. So no, I didn't feel bad. Not at all. I didn't need to answer Aunt Carol. The truth was, I wasn't going to lose any sleep over them. They had taken so much from me, and I was done being their victim. That $60,000 wasn't just money. It was a message. I was standing up for myself now, no longer letting them pull the strings. The thing that got to me more, though, was the fact that my parents and Anna didn't seem to learn anything from this. Instead of taking responsibility, they kept playing the victim. They kept calling, too. My phone would buzz with their numbers, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't interested in hearing more apologies or excuses. What good would it do? They had proven who they were, and nothing they said could change that. Mom tried to reach me the most, and I could almost hear her voice getting more desperate with each call. She must have realized by now that I wasn't going to back down, but her apology, whatever form it might take, was hollow. It didn't matter. They had taken enough from me. My grandparents' money, my grandmother's apartment, my trust. They had all been taken without a second thought. I'd also noticed the odd silence in the apartment. It wasn't just the fact that Anna wasn't there anymore, but that everything felt different. The place felt more like mine now, more like a space where I could rebuild my life without constantly feeling like I was suffocating under someone else's expectations. I even redecorated a bit, nothing too drastic, just small changes to make it feel like it was really my own. The couch was moved around, a few new pictures went up on the walls, and I added some plants. It was a work in progress, but it felt good. Then came the promotion at the cafe. I wasn't expecting it. They'd offered me the assistant manager position, and I accepted without a second thought. I didn't need the extra money. In fact, I had saved enough now that I didn't have to work nearly as many hours. But the promotion wasn't about money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was capable, that I didn't need anyone else to tell me what to do. It was about showing myself that I could make my own way, that I could build something on my own. I thought about the future for the first time in a long while. I could see it now, not as some distant dream, but as something I could actually shape. There was something freeing in that thought. I was in control. I had the power to make decisions that were in my best interest, to build a life that wasn't based on the lies and manipulation of my past. Of course, there were still moments when the anger would hit me like a wave. It wasn't just about the money, as my therapist had pointed out. It was about the years of lies, the years of being told that I didn't matter, that I wasn't worthy of respect. It was about the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. But those moments were fewer now, and I had learned to deal with them. My therapist helped with that. She taught me strategies to cope when the anger or the bitterness would rise. She reminded me that it was okay to feel the way I did, but I didn't need to let those feelings control me. It was a slow process, but every day I felt a little bit stronger, a little more like myself again. The old Janice, the one who believed in herself, who worked hard and never gave up, was starting to resurface. There were times, usually on Sundays, when I would sit in my grandmother's old reading chair by the window, drinking coffee from her favorite mug. It had become my own little tradition, a moment of quiet reflection. I'd think about her, about how much she had loved me, how much she had trusted me. She had known all along that I would be the one to take care of the apartment, to honor her memory. And now, sitting there with the mug in my hands, I felt closer to her than I ever had. It was like she was still with me in some way, guiding me through the mess that had become my family. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy. But every day I grew stronger, more independent, and more at peace with myself. I wasn't going to let the past define me. I wasn't going to let my family's mistakes dictate my future. In the end, I realized that the apartment wasn't the only thing I had inherited from my grandmother. I had inherited her strength, her resilience, and her ability to take control of her own destiny. And now, it was my turn to make sure that no one ever took that from me again. I had spent the last few months reclaiming my life, but there were still echoes from the past, haunting me when I least expected it. I could feel the weight of the years of manipulation every time I thought about my family. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to trust them again. Still, I tried to keep moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other. It was the only choice I had now. I spent my days working at the cafe and going to class. The promotion to assistant manager kept me busy, but I liked it. I liked the responsibility, the fact that I was working my way up and building something for myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was no longer the scared, unsure girl who had walked into that apartment 2 years ago, thinking she had no other choice but to trust her family. Now I was making my own decisions. I'd found some peace in the small things, like the way the sunlight poured through the windows of my grandmother's apartment in the mornings, or the way I could hear the birds chirping outside as I sat with a cup of coffee, my feet propped up on the coffee table. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. But then came the phone call. It was late one night, just as I was finishing up some homework. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. I looked down, already knowing who it was. Mom. I had been blocking her calls for months, but somehow she had found a way to get through. My heart sank. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. She had been avoiding me since that day, and the fact that she was calling now meant something had changed. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Janice?" Her voice was small, almost shaky. "Can we talk?" I almost didn't want to, but I knew this was inevitable. "What do you want, Mom?" I don't know what happened. I've been thinking about everything, and I know I made a huge mistake. I want to fix this. I don't want to lose you." There was a long pause. I could tell she was struggling to find the right words, but none of them felt genuine. This wasn't the same woman who had betrayed me, who had stolen from me without a second thought. This was a woman who was desperate to reclaim what she had lost. But I wasn't sure I could trust that. "Fix it," I repeated, my voice hard. "You can't fix this, Mom. What you did, it's not something that can just be swept under the rug." "I know," she replied softly, "but I want to try. I want to make things right. Please, Janice, I know I hurt you, but I want to start over. Please, can we meet?" My mind raced. Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell, to tell her I didn't care anymore. But there was another part of me, the part that still loved her, that wanted to believe in her again. I hated that part of me. I hated how easily she could pull on my heartstrings, even after everything. "Fine," I said finally, my voice tight. "We can meet, but don't expect me to just forget what you did. You'll need to prove to me that you're actually sorry." "I will, I promise," she said quickly. "I'll be there tomorrow, okay?" "All right," I said, then hung up. My stomach was a ball of nerves, but I didn't have a choice. I had to face her eventually. The next day, I waited for her in the same spot I had always waited for her, sitting at the kitchen table in the apartment. It felt like the place had become a battleground, a place where my future was decided, where the lies had all come to light. I wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting, but I was ready for whatever she was going to say. When she arrived, I could see the exhaustion on her face. She didn't look the same as the woman who had once stood tall, proud of her control over everything. Now, she looked small, defeated, and I could tell that the weight of her actions had begun to crush her. "I'm sorry, Janice," she said as she sat down across from me. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to make it right." I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, waiting. I wasn't sure what I was expecting her to say, but I wasn't willing to give her the satisfaction of an immediate forgiveness. I wasn't ready to pretend like everything was okay. Not yet. Not after all the years of hurt, the betrayal. I should have told you the truth about the apartment, about everything. I should have been honest with you, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. But I was scared. Scared of losing control. I was wrong, and I know that now. I don't want you to hate me. I want to make up for it. I want to try to be a better mother to you. Her words hung in the air, thick and heavy, and I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her that I didn't need her apologies or her pity. But there was another part of me that remembered the woman who had raised me, the woman who had once held me close and told me everything would be okay. That woman seemed like a distant memory now, but the connection was still there. I still loved her, even if she didn't deserve it. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "What you did, it broke something inside me. I don't know if I can trust you again. You lied to me for years, Mom. You took my future from me." She looked down at her hands, nodding, as if she understood. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back." We sat in silence for a long time. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to fix. The damage had been done, and while her apology might have been genuine, it didn't change the fact that everything had already fallen apart. Finally, I stood up, feeling the weight of everything settle into my chest. I'm done. I can't do this anymore, Mom. I need space. I need time. I'm not sure what our relationship is going to look like, but right now, I can't deal with you. She nodded quietly, tears in her eyes. I understand. Take all the time you need. As she left, I stood at the door, watching her walk away. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel closure. All I felt was a hollow sense of loss, not for the woman who had lied to me, but for the woman I had hoped she was, the mother I had wanted her to be. But I knew that I couldn't change the past. I couldn't make her fix it, no matter how much I wanted to believe that she could. What mattered now was that I had taken control of my own life. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, take that away from me again. And as I closed the door behind her, I knew that for the first time in my life, I was finally free. After my meeting with Mom, everything felt different. I didn't feel lighter, but I didn't feel the crushing weight I had been carrying for so long either. I suppose that's the best way to describe it. Neutral. It wasn't about closure, not exactly. It was about stepping into a new reality where I wasn't just playing along with the story they'd written for me. I was writing my own now. And that, in itself, was freeing. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I kept working at the cafe, and my new role as assistant manager made everything feel a little more structured, a little more in control. I even picked up a couple of extra shifts, which I didn't mind at all. It kept me busy. I didn't have to think about the past. There were times, though, when something would trigger a memory, like the sound of someone calling my name, or when I'd hear my mom's voice in a crowded space and my heart would lurch for just a second. It was funny how a voice could bring up so much. But I'd remind myself that it was just that, something from the past. I didn't need to carry it around anymore. I wasn't the same person I had been when all that drama started. The apartment felt like home again, and it didn't take long for me to realize how much I had been holding back from it. I'd always thought of it as a place I was just staying in, living there, but not really living. But now, it was mine. It was quiet, peaceful. I spent hours sitting by the window, reading, or sometimes just watching the world go by. I'd even brought in more plants, small touches to make it feel more like my own sanctuary. It was a slow process, but little by little, I was making this place mine. It was also around this time that I started feeling a shift inside myself. I wasn't just healing, I was growing. The anger and resentment that had held me in a grip for so long were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I wasn't consumed by them. It felt almost like watching the storm clear and seeing the sun again. I didn't need to keep holding on to all that pain. It had served its purpose, I suppose, but I didn't need it to carry me anymore. I began to appreciate the quiet moments more, too. My grandmother's old chair by the window, where I'd sit for hours, was where I really felt at peace. Sometimes I'd just sit there in silence, thinking about her, imagining what she would say if she were here to see how far I'd come. I could almost hear her voice, warm and steady, reminding me that I was strong enough to handle anything. It was comforting, in a way, to know that she had trusted me with the apartment, with the legacy she had left behind. Even though my mother had taken that trust for granted, I knew it was mine now. It was a reminder that I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by what I chose to do next. One evening, I found myself scrolling through my phone when I saw a message from Aunt Carol. I had blocked her calls a while ago, but something made me open the message. It was short, just a simple update. Your mom's been talking to a lawyer. She's thinking about selling the apartment. Just wanted you to know. The words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, trying to process what that meant. I hadn't spoken to my mom since that last meeting. I had no idea what her next move was going to be. But hearing that she was considering selling the apartment, it felt like a final betrayal. The apartment that had been left to me, the one I had worked so hard to keep, suddenly felt like it was slipping away again. I thought about it for a while, and then I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her take this from me. Not again. I called Miss Roberts, my lawyer, and explained the situation. She was quick to reassure me that no one could sell the apartment without my permission. It was legally mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me, not even my mother. I kept the information to myself for a few days. I didn't want to involve anyone else in this mess, not yet. I needed to be sure of my decision. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. A week later, I sent my mom a message. It was clear, concise, and firm. "The apartment is mine, Mom. You have no legal right to sell it. If you try, I'll take legal action. Consider this your final warning." I didn't expect an immediate response, and I didn't get one. But somehow that felt right. I wasn't looking for a fight, I was just asserting my rights. I had already let go of the anger. This was just about making sure she understood that I wouldn't be pushed around anymore. In the weeks that followed, the tension between us slowly dissipated. Mom didn't call anymore, and I didn't reach out either. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore, it was about respect. And while I didn't feel the need to hold on to the past, I didn't need to keep pretending everything was fine either. Aunt Carol told me that Mom had backed off from selling the apartment, and I didn't hear anything more about it. Maybe she realized that this was a battle she couldn't win, or maybe she just didn't care anymore. Either way, I was done. The apartment was mine, and so was my life. As for Anna, I never heard from her again. I didn't expect her to change, and honestly, I didn't care. She had never been the person I could rely on, and I had stopped looking for her approval long ago. She was living her own life, and I was living mine. That was the only way forward. I kept my routine, work, school, studying. But there was a quiet satisfaction now. I had built something. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. I was doing it on my own terms, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The last few months had taught me that I didn't need anyone's approval to live the life I wanted. It wasn't about the apartment or the money anymore. It was about the freedom to make my own choices, to carve out a future that was truly mine. I had learned the hard way that the people you trust most can hurt you the deepest, but I had also learned that you're the one who gets to decide how you move forward, and so I did. Every day, I chose to move forward, to live my life, to build the future I deserved. The past had been messy, but it didn't have to define me. I had everything I needed to create something better, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Story 2. It was obvious to me as soon as I could comprehend that my older brother Tommy was the best child and that I was merely there. The afterthought, the girl. "Make sure you get home by 3:30, Nicole, so you can assist your brother with his lunch." Almost every morning before school, Mom would say. I was 12. Tommy was 15, and the family prodigy apparently found it too hard to make a sandwich. "But Mom, I wanted to join the art club after school. Even though I knew it was pointless, I played. Your brother is practicing for football. He must eat healthily. You are aware of how crucial that is to him." She'd give me that look, the one that declared the conversation to be over before it even started. Meanwhile, Tommy would be splayed on the couch, his latest iPhone in hand. My hand-me-down flip phone felt like a thing of the past century thanks to a birthday present. He would smirk, Nikki, without even raising his eyes from his screen, act like a good sister. It was even terrible for Dad. He would say, "Nicole, this is good practice for when you're a wife," as though that were the highest goal I could strive for. A woman must be able to care for her family. It was the same procedure every day. I would quickly go home from school, prepare Tommy's meal, iron his clothing for the following day, and attempt to fit in my homework in between housework. While all of this was going on, Tommy would be at one of his numerous after-school activities: football, debating club, computer programming lessons. His parents made sure he had every chance they could. Grandma Rose was the only one who appeared to truly notice me. My haven was her ancient Victorian home on the opposite side of town. I used to ride my bike over there every weekend, pedaling quickly through the streets lined with trees until I could see her characteristic wraparound porch. There's my gal. Her silver hair would shine in the sunlight as she called out from her garden, within her home. There was no golden kid, no hierarchy, nothing but sweets, warmth, and unconditional love. Grandma Rose's home resembled a scene from an old film. There are chambers filled with intriguing artifacts, carved wooden banisters, and creaking flooring. Sure, the wallpaper was peeling in spots and some of the windows stuck when you tried to open them. However, I cherished every flaw in it. Our immaculate suburban home never seemed as homely as this one. The way Grandma treated us while we were there was just as amazing as the building itself. Whether it was a typical weekend visit, a birthday celebration, or Christmas, I always received the same treatment as Tommy: cookies of the same size, tender embraces, and considerate presents. It drove Tommy completely nuts. The day it all came to a head is something I will always remember. Grandma purchased us both new tablets for Tommy's 16th birthday. Nice ones, but the same. After glancing at his, Tommy lost it. "Do you mean me?" He sprang to his feet, his face flushed with rage. Nicole receives the exact same item as me on my birthday. With her hands folded in her lap, Grandma Rose sat serenely in her antique armchair. "I love you both equally, Tommy, my sweetheart. However, that is unfair." He was virtually yelling. "Right now. I usually get better goods from my parents. They are aware that I am deserving. The academics, athletic accomplishments, and future belong to me. Nicole simply is." Before I could speak, I felt as though I had been smacked. Grandma Rose got to her feet. Although she was not a tall woman, she appeared to be taller than any of us at that very time. Parker, Thomas Michael. Though quiet, her voice was as sharp as a knife. "That's not how you'll talk about your sister. In my home, or any place else really, I'm not going to let it." Grandma's assortment of china teacups shook in their cabinet as Tommy bounded out the front door. I anticipated it to be the end of it, but it wasn't. Grandma unexpectedly arrived at our place the next day. I listened to her conversing with Mom and Dad in the living room while I sat at the top of the stairs. She spoke in a clear voice. "The way you're rearing these youngsters is unacceptable. The partiality must end." "We're acting in their best interests, Mom." My mom made an attempt to argue. "Really? What do you call that?" It was Grandma's voice. "Well, things must alter if you want me to continue providing for their upbringing financially." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Later that night, I overheard Mom and Dad conversing in their bedroom. "We cannot risk losing her money. Mom was stating we need it for Tommy's college fund. For whatever he does." Dad groaned. "I know. To please your mother, we'll have to cooperate, call him, and do other things." All of a sudden, things shifted. Within a week, I was enrolled in the piano lessons I'd been longing for since I was 10. On my bedside table, a brand new iPhone showed up. My parents started inquiring about my day during supper. When I went to see Grandma again, in the garden, she was caring for her flowers. She smiled knowingly as she gazed up at me. With her printing shears in hand, she added, "You know, dear, I receive thorough reports detailing the expenditure of every dollar of my assistance funds. These days, your parents seem to be making much wiser decisions. Do you not think? Realizing that your parents' love has limitations is an odd experience. Indeed, they were only following the routine, asking me about my day, making purchases for me, and attending my school functions. They weren't in it, though. They would still have distinct lighting in their eyes. When Tommy entered the space, I came to terms with it. At least I no longer had to spend every afternoon serving as Tommy's personal maid, and I had my piano lessons. Acceptance might sometimes be simpler than advocating for change. You would think Tommy had won the Nobel Prize when he graduated from high school and was admitted to State University, which is 3 hours away. Parents hosted a lavish celebration, invited all of their family members, and gave speeches praising their talented kid. For the first several months, Grandma Rose sat in the corner and watched everything with those shrewd eyes. At family gatherings, we only heard about Tommy's success in college. Every week, he would phone home and share tales of his classes, lecturers, and promising business prospects. With pride, Mom and Dad would put him on speakerphone. The letter then arrived. Dad barged into the home with an official-looking package while I was in my final year of high school. His angry face turned crimson. Tommy faced expulsion and was on academic probation. He had been talking about study sessions, but it turned out that they were really parties. He had seldom gone to any lessons. Grandma Rose arrived the following day. She had never looked so irate to me. She informed my parents, "If you don't get that boy in line." Her voice like steel. "When he gets himself expelled from this college, don't expect me to cover another one. And trust me, with these grades, no other institution will accept him." My parents were in a panic because they thought they may lose Grandma's money. That same weekend, they took a car to State University. Tommy seemed different when he phoned the next week, though I'm not sure what they said to him specifically. Quiet. Tommy had to deal with real repercussions for the first time in his life. Tommy miraculously improved his grades enough to continue his education. He chose to remain in that city after graduating 4 years later, accepting a position at a nearby business. In the meantime, I had enrolled in City College's business management program, which was only 20 minutes away from my house. My parents hardly appeared to notice that I was attending college, but Grandma Rose also covered my tuition. The only way I celebrated making the dean's list was by calling my grandmother. After just 4 years, I was graduating with honors. Naturally, Grandma was there, beaming with pride. Although they spoke on Tommy's progress at his new work for the most of the ceremony, my parents also attended. I was no longer concerned. In addition to my degree, I received an offer of employment from Parker & Associates, one of the largest marketing companies in the area. For a moment after Grandma Rose's death, it seemed as though the world had stopped. I kept looking at her garden on the day of her burial, wondering who would now take care of her cherished roses. A week following the funeral, the will was read at her lawyer's office. Tommy, who had flown in from out the state, looked like a child playing dress-up despite his pricey outfit. As though they were still necessary as buffers after all these years, Mom and Dad sat between us. Mrs. Rose Parker's estate is to be divided between her 2 grandchildren, Nicole and Thomas Parker, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. He hesitated, staring at both of us. The division is to be chosen by their own choosing. The house will be given to one, while the other will get $500,000. As the older grandchild, Thomas gets the first pick. Tommy literally snorted. Could this be a joke? He surveyed the space. "Do you think I'll desire that musty old house? No, I'll accept the cash. I have plans. I intend to launch my own company. Let me prove myself to everyone." The old lady's house, complete with creaking floorboards and strange odors, is Nicole's. My heart was racing as I sat there. Grandma's home, my haven, all those years. I'll accept it. Silently but forcefully, I said. The following few years at Parker & Associates were a haze of perseverance and hard labor. I gave every project and assignment my all. I was elevated to head of sales within 3 years as my team's sales figures continued to break records. My achievement resulted in pay raises, which I immediately used to renovate my grandmother's home. I took my time renovating the house, keeping its charm intact while updating all the other features, such as the plumbing and electricity, and adding a modern kitchen that somehow managed to seem like it belonged in a Victorian house. I took care of the garden myself, carrying on my grandmother's tradition and learning everything I could about roses. Mom and Dad came to visit once everything was done. I observed how their eyes enlarged at the crown molding, the hardwood floors, and the gourmet kitchen as they moved through the renovated rooms. This is amazing. Mom ran her hand down the marble countertop. Dad groaned after nodding. It's a shame Tommy didn't take the house. This would have been ideal for him and his new bride. And there it was. There are certain things that never change, Mom said, attempting to appear informal. Speaking of which, has your brother contacted you recently? I hadn't. Naturally, 6 months prior, none of us had received an invitation to his wedding. In front of his wife's family and their common acquaintances, he had tied the knot in her hometown. Mom showed me photos she had discovered on Facebook, Tommy wearing a tux, Rebecca, his new wife, grinning in expensive white. On a Sunday afternoon, I was trimming Grandma's flowers when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I took my time washing the dirt off my hands before stepping to the door. I almost dropped my gardening gloves when I opened it. Tommy was standing there, not at all like the self-assured businessman he had been posing as on social media. A woman I knew from the wedding pictures was standing next to him, his wife, Rebecca. She over-applied cosmetics and donned expensive clothing. She looked about my house as if she were doing an examination. Tommy shot me a pitying glance. "Can we have a private conversation for a moment?" "Nikki?" We entered Grandma's former study, my home office now. Tommy shut the door behind us and looked at me in a way I had never seen him do before. Desperation. His voice was no more than a whisper when he murmured, "Sis, I need your help. The company. It's not good. We are on the verge of losing everything." He ran his hands through his hair when we had to vacate our flat. "Is it possible for us to remain here? Until things improve?" Stunned, I stood there. I had never been asked for anything by Tommy before, unless you include the years of need-pressed clothing and lunches. "Please," he added, and I saw my brother rather than my parents for the first time since we were young. Golden child. "Okay," I heard myself say, but just momentarily. My doorbell rang once more the next morning. This time, Mom and Dad were virtually jumping with joy. As soon as Tommy notified us, we arrived. Mom hurried past me to give Rebecca a hug. "Oh dear, we can't wait to spend the next 2 hours with you in person." I could have passed for invisible. At Mom's haughty request, I brought coffee and listened to Rebecca regale my folks with tales of Tommy's successful business endeavors and her family's social ties. "Nicole." As I made my way to the kitchen, Mom shouted out, "Make us some lunch, please." Something pleasant. Fine eating, which Rebecca is accustomed to, set the tone for the weeks that followed. Tommy and Rebecca would be relaxing in my living room when I got home from a hard day at work, waiting for dinner to emerge out of thin air. "Will you not begin to prepare food?" One evening, Rebecca inquired without raising her head from her phone. "We're going hungry. I recently finished a 12-hour workday," I said, putting down my briefcase. "Why don't you prepare a meal?" Rebecca's eyes narrowed as her head jerked up. "Please pardon me. You ought to be appreciative that we allowed you to be here at all. Cutting quality food would be the least you could do." Perplexed, I turned to Tommy. Once more, he dragged me into the study. "Look," he said hastily in a whisper. "Rebecca believes this to be my home. I'm letting you remain here out of charity, she believes. She's from a wealthy family. She is accustomed to a particular way of life. I'm essentially bankrupt if she finds out." His voice broke. "She will abandon me." I gazed at my brother, a guy who had been given everything in his life, now pleading with me to tell his wife a falsehood. "All right," I responded at last. "You two need to start showing me respect in my own house, but I won't tell her. No more attitude, no more demands. Deal, deal." Tommy gave a brief nod. "Thank you. Nikki, I mean it." As promised, Tommy ceased insisting on home-cooked meals. Instead, my kitchen counter would be covered in takeaway containers from the best restaurants in the city when I returned home. Rebecca would be choosing between sushi and pad thai while relaxing on my couch, barely recognizing my presence. I made no inquiries. To be honest, after a long day at the office, I was simply glad I wasn't playing cook. I got into my own rhythm and went to the laid-back cafe close to work for supper. The plan appeared to be effective. They did not obstruct me. I avoided being in theirs. The phone call then arrived. Nicole. The tone of Mom's speech was the same as when she was going to insist on whatever we created in order to talk about the restaurant bills. "Tommy assured us that you would pay the bills at the end of the month. It's almost $3,000. My coffee almost suffocated me. "Please pardon me. You can't expect them to go hungry, though." As though this were the most sensible thing in the world, Mom went on. Tommy mentioned that since they're going through a difficult time, you volunteered to pay for their food expenditures. I've been using my credit card for everything. The account information for the transfer will be texted to you. I ended the call. I opened my text messages and sent one to Tommy, my hands trembling. Now come to me. He showed up in my study within 15 minutes, so he must have heard something in those 2 words. Rebecca used his money to go shopping. I had no desire to find out. Would you mind explaining why your mother believes I'm footing the bill for your extravagant takeaway habits? I asked in a very hushed voice. Tommy was caught in a lie, and his face did the thing it used to do when we were youngsters. There was a brief moment of guilt before the justifications began. You must understand, Nikki. Know what? Because you are now robbing our parents as well. I'm not stealing. He combed his hair with his hands. I simply borrowed. When things improved, I was going to reimburse them. But she has some expectations, Rebecca. If she understood the true severity of the situation, give up. I extended my hand. I've listened to Rebecca's expectations long enough. This is over. I'll find a solution. With beseeching eyes, he pledged. Give me more time, please. Don't tell Rebecca. Nikki, please. I've never made any requests of you. I was never asked for anything. I got to my feet, raising my voice. Do you mean me? I spent my whole childhood taking care of you. You're now residing in my home, lying to your wife and scamming our parents. I know. He held up his hands. I'm sorry. Really? Just one more chance. I'll handle the restaurant bills. I promise. I stared at my brother. This man who had everything handed to him his whole life, now reduced to begging his little sister to keep his house of cards from collapsing? All right, I said finally. One more chance. But I mean it, Tommy. Figure out your own food situation, and I'm not paying a cent of those bills. Life fell into an uncomfortable routine over the next 2 months. I'd go to work, manage my department, come home to find my house looking like a hurricane, had swept through it, and spent my evenings cleaning up after Tommy and Rebecca. They seemed to exist in their own bubble of leisure. Lunches with our parents, dinners at expensive restaurants, shopping trips I didn't want to know the details of. Then came the day that changed everything. Tommy had left early, muttering something about a business meeting. I came home from work earlier than usual, having wrapped up a major sales presentation, looking forward to a quiet evening with a glass of wine. Rebecca was waiting for me in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa like a queen about to deliver a royal decree. We need to talk, she announced, gesturing to the armchair across from her set. I raised an eyebrow at her tone, but sat down anyway. Might as well hear whatever this was about. I've been patient. Rebecca began examining her manicured nails. I've watched you swagger around this house like you own the place, making everyone uncomfortable. But enough is enough. I blinked. Please pardon me. From now on, you'll pay us $2,000 a month in rent. That's more than fair, given the neighborhood. She smiled tightly. And you'll resume cooking and cleaning duties. The state of this house is embarrassing, and since you're the tenant, I couldn't help it. I started laughing, not a polite chuckle, but full-blown tears in my eyes. Laughter. Rebecca's face darkened. What exactly is so amusing? I wiped my eyes, trying to catch my breath. Rebecca, honey, there seems to be a misunderstanding. I live here. I own it. Your husband is living here because I took pity on him when he came begging at my door. The color drained from her face. You're lying. Call him, I said, leaning back in my chair. Go ahead. Ask Tommy, who owns this house? Her hands shaking slightly. Rebecca pulled out her phone and dialed. Tommy answered on the second ring. Darling? Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Nicole is spinning some ridiculous story about owning the house. Tell her she's mistaken. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She's telling the truth. Tommy's voice crackled through the speaker. It's her house. Grandma left it to her in the will. I took the money instead to start a business, but I failed. We're broke. I've been trying to find a way to tell you. Rebecca stood up so fast she knocked over her water glass. I watched as she stormed upstairs, her door slamming, closet doors banging. Within 20 minutes, she was dragging her designer suitcases down my stairs. She didn't say a word as she left. The slam of the front door echoed through the house like a gunshot. The morning after Rebecca left, I was enjoying my coffee and peaceful silence when Tommy burst through the front door. His face was twisted with rage, all traces of yesterday's contrition gone. "This is all your fault," he shouted, stalking into my kitchen. "Rebecca is filing for divorce. She won't even talk to me. You had no right to tell her the truth." I set my coffee cup down carefully, remembering all the times I backed down from his anger. Over the years. Not now. No. Correct. I stood up slowly. "This is my house, Tommy." "The house?" She laughed at me for choosing the house you said smelled like an old lady, the house you've been lying about to your wife while mooching off our parents, and you're telling me I had no right? You ruined everything. He slammed his fist on my counter. "You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? Always waiting for a chance to get back at me. Leave now." I spoke quietly yet firmly. "Take your things and go." He stared at me for a moment, then stormed upstairs. I listened to him throwing things around in the guest room, probably breaking something expensive. I didn't care. When he came back down with his bags, he gave me one last venomous look. I had exactly 1 hour apiece before my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom's name. "How could you do this to your brother?" She didn't even say hi. "He's devastated. He's back home with us now." Crying his eyes out. "That's not my problem." "Of course it's your problem." Dad's voice now. "They had me on speaker. You need to give Tommy the house. It's the only way to save his marriage. Rebecca might come back if they have a proper home." I actually laughed. "Are you serious? You want me to give away my house because Tommy lied to his wife and ruined his business? He's your brother." Mom was practically shrieking. "Right now. Family helps. Family." Really? I felt a lifetime of resentment bubbling up. Where was that family spirit when I was cooking and cleaning for Tommy as a kid? Where was it when you ignored my achievements? Because you were too busy praising him? The only person who ever treated me like family was Grandma, and she left this house to me. This conversation is over. 2 months later, I heard through work colleagues that Tommy's company had officially declared bankruptcy. His divorce was finalized around the same time he was living with our parents, apparently regrouping. Their favorite word for Tommy's failures. I wasn't surprised when all 3 of them showed up at my door one Sunday afternoon. Mom was clutching a casserole dish like a peace offering. Dad had that stern look he used to use when he was about to lecture me about family duty. Tommy stood behind them, trying to look pitiful. I watched them through the security camera Grandma had installed years ago. They rang the bell again and again. Mom started calling out, "Nicole, we know you're in there. We need to talk about this as a family." I picked up my phone and sent a single text to all 3 of them. "Leave now, please. Do not come back. This is your only warning before I call the police." They left eventually, but not before Mom left the casserole on my porch with a note about forgiveness and family obligations. I donated the casserole to the homeless shelter down the street. These days, my life is peaceful. I tend to Grandma's roses, which are blooming more beautifully than ever. My career is thriving. I made Executive VP last month. I feel good, and it's all thanks to Grandma. Story 3. I'm Amalia, and responsibility has been with me ever since I can remember. There was always a lot going on in our small house. My baby sister, who entered our life when I was 10, and my 2 younger brothers running around. "Would you mind changing Sarah's diaper, Amalia, honey?" Mom's voice, worn out from working double shifts, would ring out. I would quickly drop what I was doing to assist. That was the norm for us. Everyone, with the exception of Sarah, contributed in. She was different as soon as she got there. "She is still a baby. Leave her alone," Dad would say to dismiss any worries about her actions. In an attempt to support us all, I watched as my parents worked themselves to the bone. Dad at the building site, Mom is cleaning the house. To keep food on the table and dreams alive in our hearts, they exerted every effort. Being the middle children, my brothers Mike and David were sometimes overlooked in the mix between Sarah's privileges and my obligations. We traded knowing looks across the dinner table when Sarah would throw another tantrum and get her way again. In an effort to escape the pattern of barely making ends meet, I began working as soon as I graduated from high school. Although the neighborhood diner was unglamorous, it was a beginning. Every dime I made went into my college savings jar, stashed somewhere in my closet. Late at night, I would count it, hoping to have enough to enroll in community college courses. My managers were aware of my commitment within a year. After I transitioned from waitressing to bookkeeping, my aspirations of attending college became less unrealistic. I enrolled in evening programs, managing employment and studies with a dedication that amazed even me. The fatigue was genuine. I would occasionally nod off while reading my textbooks, only to wake up early for another shift. However, seeing Sarah sleep until noon, skip class whenever she wanted, and get away with it all simply made me more determined to achieve. One night, as I was studying in the kitchen at midnight, Dad cautioned me that I was going to burn myself out. I grinned as I glanced up from my accounting assignment. "I'm heading somewhere, maybe." "I swear to you, Dad, my college degree gave me access to opportunities I never would have imagined. First National Bank recruited me as a junior analyst, and I put myself into the work with the same tenacity that got me through school. My boss drew me aside after a few months. "I've never witnessed someone pick things up so fast," Amalia said. "You'll get far here if you keep at this pace." She was not mistaken. While others grumbled about office politics, I was good with statistics and much better with people. I got through them with ease. Perhaps I had learned something valuable from all those years of handling family relationships. Ultimately, my brothers David and Mike, meanwhile, had left home and begun their own lives. Sarah, on the other hand, continued to live her life without consequence at home. She had always done so. When Mom called, she would give me updates that I didn't want to hear. Sarah left around 3 in the morning. She would sigh once more and add, "I worry, but you know how she is." Yes, I was aware. I was also aware of the general lack of focus, the parade of boyfriends, and the poor grades. However, it was no longer my issue. Now I had my own place, my own life, and my own objectives. Then came the call that made all the difference. One morning, Sarah's expecting mother made an announcement. The dad has left for Arizona, that he has no interest in it. I tightened my hold on my phone and promised to assist her in raising the child. Naturally, can we do anything else? They would, of course. Even at 18, Sarah remained their beloved baby, even carrying a child of her own. I didn't say anything since I knew what would happen next. "Amalia, won't you also assist? Visit us on the weekends. You're really skilled with kids." At that point, I began to come up with a remarkable number of reasons. Client meetings, professional development classes, and urgent job assignments. Anything to avoid caring for yet another child during my little leisure time. During one very stressful phone discussion, Mom exclaimed, "I don't understand you anymore. You were really helpful once. I used to be a kid who was forced to help." I corrected her. "Now that I'm an adult, I have my own life." However, family. Family is reciprocal. I send you money every month. "Where have you gone, Mom?" That typically silences them, at least for a while. Sarah's prenatal care was covered by the sizable checks I paid. Baby supplies come next, followed by continuing costs. However, it was never sufficient to gain their acceptance. Lisa informed me over coffee one day that they were disparaging you behind your back, Maya, saying you've changed, you know. Get chilly. I patiently brew my coffee while seeing the patterns the cream makes in the dark beverage. Let them speak. In any case, they have never comprehended me. They claim that you lack gratitude, she continued. I gave her a direct glance. Thank you. For what purpose? The honor of caring for their other kids, the chance to raise their grandchild today. At Lisa, I've worked hard for all I own, everything. That week, he was promoted to senior analyst. Both my pay and the checks I sent home rose once again. However, I maintained my boundaries. No last-minute childcare or babysitting on the weekends. No favors at the last minute. Give me the name Kelly's. Between client meetings and financial reports, I'd been the responsible one long enough. Not that romance was a top concern. Up until James's message appeared on my phone that rainy Tuesday night, I had hardly used my dating app. There was something off about his profile. Perhaps it was the sincere grin or the absence of selfies taken at the gym without shirts. His message said, "I noticed she works in finance." In reality, I work as an investment advisor. Perhaps over coffee, we could bore each other with market jargon. I never imagined I'd have time for the type of connection that developed from that coffee to supper, weekends, and 2 years later. Even after my most trying days, James was able to make me laugh and was understanding of my work schedule. "I never thought I'd find someone who understands both compound interest and my terrible jokes," he commented one evening as we strolled around the park. Next came the suggestion, "Nothing ostentatious. After a homemade dinner, it's just the two of us at my apartment. My life would be impossible without you." He held out the ring as he said, "Get married to me." Before he could complete his question, I said, "Yes." The process of introducing him to my family went remarkably well. A little wonder was that Sarah even behaved herself. My folks were ecstatic. Their workaholic daughter was finally starting a family. Mom exclaimed after our first family meal together, "He's amazing, Amalia. Did you notice how wonderful he is with Tommy?" She was referring to my nephew, Sarah's kid, who had in fact developed a quick fancy to James. The wedding was stunning, and the beginning of married life was ideal. James seemed to have always been a part of the family. When we were there, he would spend hours teaching Tommy how to build with blocks or toss a ball. Sarah observed these exchanges with a certain ferocity that was not immediately apparent. She would smile meaningfully at me and remark, "He's going to be such an amazing father." "Amalia, you're really fortunate." That was the beginning of the question. From James himself, then from my family. Isn't it time for him to ask? Tommy was running about our living room. Our age isn't decreasing. I would repeatedly explain my stance. I want us to be absolutely ready. First, we built our own home. Not in this unit. We achieved security and savings, but we're doing fine. He'd counter. They both do wonderful jobs. What are we waiting for? For the proper moment, I'd urge one child when we're ready. We decided on that idea. During family get-togethers, I could sense his disappointment, even though he would say, and then stop talking. I would see him staring at Tommy with longing. "Your sister is doing nicely," he would say, occasionally not quite removing the sharpness from his voice. "My sister depends on our parents' retirement funds and resides with them." "That's not what I want for our child," I would respond. Like watching storm clouds develop on a bright day, the tension increased gradually and almost imperceptibly. Though you convince yourself it's still a long way off, you know the rain is coming. I was too preoccupied with being promoted. We had a house savings fund, and I had meticulously planned out our 5 years of marriage and spring cleaning. Still required navigating James's mess. He was never good at organizing his half of the closet. I began that Saturday morning like any other, going through old receipts, exercise clothing I had forgotten, and the normal mess that piled up on his shelves. I discovered it at that point. I had never seen a phone like this before. I took it up, feeling sick to my stomach, tucked under his winter jackets. Not his office phone, not his own phone, not even the latch was on it. I opened the mails with trembling hands. Sarah, my younger sister, gave me the first one I saw. "You already can't wait for her to return to work on Saturday, miss. I wish I could hide the hundreds of messages and images. Talk about me. LOL, she has no idea. Always in the office. Her valuable career is all that matters to her. Months passed before the timestamps appeared. I sat on the floor of the closet after my legs failed me, reading one message after another, each one getting worse. Then I noticed it. The telegram that brought my world to a halt. "The baby is unquestionably yours. Today, 12 weeks along, the doctor verified." I don't recall taking the car to my parents' place. Other than the phone in my white-knuckled hand, I don't recall anything. There was Sarah. Naturally. Cartoons on Saturday mornings with Tommy. One large, contented family. What on earth is this? On the coffee table, I tossed the phone. Startled, Tommy looked up, and his mother hurried him to his room to play. Sarah didn't even bat an eyelid. As if to check the weather, she took up the phone and casually browsed through it. "Well, I suppose that's all you have to say now. Are you having an affair with my husband?" She gave a shrug. In fact, I shrugged. "We have fallen in love, Amalia. These things do occur. And now that the kid is on the way, James and I want to tie the knot. As soon as Amalia stops being tough about it." Hard? What I was hearing was unbelievable. "I'm being challenging." "Yes," Sarah said, as if she were describing something easy to a young kid. "In any case, you never desired children. Your valuable career is keeping you too busy. A true family is what James needs." I looked to my parents, hoping they would say something to support me, to denounce this treachery. Mom, on the other hand, knelt down beside Sarah and patted her hand. Amalia made an effort to be sensible. "James is excellent with Tommy, who needs a father figure. Additionally, a new baby is on the way." Reasonable. My voice broke. "There is an affair between my sister and my spouse. Do you also expect me to be sensible?" Dad cleared his throat. "You didn't want kids then, James and Honey. Being a father has always been his dream. Perhaps this is a good thing. How recently did you even prepare his dinner?" A good wife would be Sarah. As my family sat there guarding the unassailable, I turned to face them, smug and expecting my husband's child, Sarah. The next wedding is already being planned by Mom. Dad is obviously on their side, but he's avoiding my gaze. A good wife. "Like your beloved Sarah, who cheats on you and with her sister's husband," I repeated numbly. Sarah gave an eye roll. "Amalia, don't be so dramatic. Simply return to your large office and your crucial meetings. Family matters should be left to those who genuinely care about them. The drive home from my parents' house is hardly a memory for me. The world didn't seem real, as if I were witnessing the disintegration of someone else's life rather than my own." James was in the living room pretending it was just another Saturday when I walked through our front door. "Hello, sweetheart." He came over to give me a hug, his smile, that familiar one. The smile I once adored. I felt sick to my stomach from that smile. Holding up his second phone, I took a step back. "Do you want to explain?" His face changed in an instant. Confusion at first, followed by recognition and fear. "Where did you discover it?" "While doing the cleaning. You should really look for better places to hide your affair." "Amalia, phones. I can clarify. Describe what? The messages, the pictures, or perhaps describe how you conceived my sister." First, he attempted denial, like they all do. "It's not. I mean, I didn't, but he must have seen something in my face," because suddenly his whole demeanor changed. The mask dropped completely. "All right, indeed. Sarah and I are together." He lost his temper. "What did you expect? You're never home. All you care about is work, work, work. When was the last time we ever had a serious talk about establishing a family? Oh, so this is my fault? You deceived because I desired financial security before having children. You never wanted children?" "Not really. You always had some excuse. The house, the savings, the appropriate moment. Sarah truly wants a family. She is aware of what matters in life." I was disgusted when I saw this man, this stranger, wearing my husband's face. Loyalty is what matters in life, basic human decency and honor. But I suppose you and my dear sister don't care about those things. Acting arrogant is not necessary. He grinned. "The only reason you're upset is that Sarah is giving me something you wouldn't." The following day, the divorce papers were submitted. It went through fast since I had records of the encounter. To assist me in leaving the flat, my brothers David and Mike came. The only people who supported me were them. As we packed boxes, Mike said, "We always knew Sarah was spoiled. This is a new low, though." David was unable to even pronounce her name. "I think they're dead," he said, to my brothers, both of them. I couldn't help but hear the updates I didn't want to hear. In a modest ceremony, James and Sarah were married. Naturally, my parents were there, beaming with pride. The baby was born, a female. They relocated to a modest suburban home. Tommy began referring to James as Dad. At one of our monthly dinners, Mike informed me that Mom is always trying to convince us to come see them, claims that we must reunite as a family. David raised his glass and stated, We are a family. All three of us. That's sufficient. I nodded, appreciating my brother's devotion. In a society where loyalty didn't appear to matter anymore, there are betrayals that cannot be forgiven, bridges that cannot be repaired, and families that are better off broken for years. We were the only ones who realized that these things exist. My new apartment has marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city skyline, and enough room to finally put the art collection on display. I had always desired. The garage lights shone on the Mercedes parked in my designated space. I had made it just the way I had intended. James and Sarah were having financial difficulties, and my brothers frequently dropped by with gossip and news. In 2 years, they had moved 3 times, each time to a smaller apartment. I didn't care, though. I had stopped caring about their lives until that Tuesday night, when I saw a number on my phone that I had assumed I would never see again. Even though Amalia James is 4 years older than me, I can still recognize her voice, and it makes my stomach turn. Don't hang up, please. I ought to have. I choose to listen instead. As if he had any right to ask me for anything, he replied, "We need your help." Sarah was involved in an accident, severely fractured her leg, fracture of a compound. Despite having surgery, she is unable to move, unable to look after the children. She is also pregnant once again. I pondered whether this was a cosmic joke as I sat there with my phone to my ear. Someone needs to come get the kids from school. Until I get home from work, keep an eye on them. With the impending arrival of a new baby, Tommy is becoming too large to manage things by himself. He hesitated. We hoped you would be able to assist. What did you think? I sounded weirdly composed. Amalia, they're your nephews. Your household? Right now, Sarah is unable to even go to the restroom by herself. My relatives. I said it again. The sister who had an affair with my spouse, as well as the husband who betrayed me. My family is that. Don't act that way. His voice changed from begging to accusing as he snapped, "It's not about us here. It concerns defenseless kids in need of assistance. What makes you so self-centered to give a damn about them?" Too self-centered? It nearly made me chuckle. It's impressive that you said it. Here, we're having trouble. He raised his voice. Are you aware of the high cost of children? Just to put food on the table, I'm putting in extra hours. Even a quality apartment is now out of our price range. You're enjoying the good life in your opulent condo and expensive automobile in the meantime. That's what this is all about then, cash. He responded sourly, "Not all of us can concentrate only on our careers. There are those of us who have actual obligations. With all much money and no one else to spend it on except yourself, it must be great." I said icily, "It must be nice to have the family you stole and no way to support them." It seems like a true dream realized. The children require parents who did not establish their connection based on treachery. James, goodbye. Before he could return my call, I hung up and blocked his phone. The appearance of my mother's number on my phone was nearly as unwanted as James's had been. Still, I responded. I couldn't quite shake some old habit. Amalia. When Mom wanted anything, she always used that tone in her voice. Sarah has to be discussed. She requires assistance. Did James not call you? About her leg. I walked my living room, resisting the need to end the call right away. I'll tell you what I told him, and he did indeed. It's not my issue. How come you're so icy? She's your sister. She has 3 kids and is having difficulties. Well, I'll be 3 shortly. The sister who had an affair with my spouse. That sister, Mom let out a deep sigh. Years have passed since then. You have to get over it, Amalia. We are related. It's funny that family only counts when you need me. We have done our best to assist her. Mom continues to beg for money, but her voice cracks a bit. For everything, even the rent and the children, all of our funds have been spent. We can't continue like this, your father and I. I couldn't contain my laughter. At last, the golden kid is proving too costly to care for. Don't be mean. She is just. She has never mastered it. Mom walked away. To what end? Work. Provide for herself. Accept accountability for her behavior. I wonder why? She simply never stops producing children." Mom exclaimed, at last letting out her displeasure. "She refuses to hunt for work. She claims to be too busy with the kids, yet she is constantly in need of money. She seems to be just the kind of person you brought up," I said icily. "The princess who was never held accountable. That's not the correct way for you to talk to me." Mom's voice lifted. "Your mommy is me. And who is to blame for Sarah's development? He taught her that nothing was ever hers without effort, that she would always be saved by someone. We gave it our all. No, you gave it your best shot. You're phoning me now because feeding the monster you made is too costly. It is your responsibility to support your family." Now Mom was practically yelling, "You've done everything for me and we've done everything for you," I interrupted. "Do you mean helping my sister when she cheated on my husband? Or as if I were selfish for desiring financial stability before starting a family? I have nothing to repay you." Before she could answer, I hung up. 4 years of repressed anger have left my hands trembling. Suddenly, the best retaliation seemed to be the pricey view outside my apartment window. Without their assistance or consent, my life unfolded precisely as I had imagined it would. I was looking over quarterly reports one evening when Mike called. "Sarah, you have no idea who attempted to contact me today." The desperation tour was already on the road, as I knew. Bingo asked me to assist with the children and perhaps provide them a loan till they were able to support themselves. As like they had ever been upright in the first place, he snorted. "You told her what?" David reminded her yesterday that certain betrayals are irreversible, that her treatment of you went beyond simple infidelity. A family was being destroyed. She broke down in tears and accused us of being unkind. That family ought to support other families. He hesitated. She didn't seem overly worried about her family, I reminded her, when she and her spouse were having sex. Gazing at the city lights, I reclined on my office chair. What was her reaction to that? About what you would anticipate. Began yelling that we were all against her, how no one is aware of how difficult her life is. He chuckled grimly. "I suppose." At last, karma caught up with her. David delivered the much-anticipated news 2 weeks later. They went to live with their parents, each and every one, Sarah, James, the kids, and the baby. On the way. Dad is making another bedroom out of his workshop. What are Dad and Mom doing about it? Do you recall how tranquil retirement was meant to be? These days they work as ATMs and babysitters full-time. While Sarah heals, Mom is taking care of the children, which reportedly means she spends the whole day browsing on her phone. To pay for their bills, Dad is taking money out of his pension. I gave a headshake. They made their pick. David went on, "Mom stopped by my place yesterday. I was wondering if I may speak with you about lending a hand. Claim to be overburdened. They probably are." Mom unexpectedly knocked on my door the next day. I nearly failed to identify her. She appeared older and more worn out than just physically, please. Before I could say a word, she began, "Now, just listen." I interrupted her. "You pay attention. You picked all of it. You decided to treat Sarah, run. When she deceived me, you decided to stand by her side. You elected to let them move in. These are your options, Mama. Cohabitate with them. And I'll contact the cops if you come to my door once more. Do we understand?" I interrupted her once more as she began to speak. "Remember that this was your decision the next time you feel overburdened. Instead of choosing the one who always put out effort and acted morally, you went with the one who betrayed her sister. Live with it now." I closed the door on her protestations and banned her phone. Apart from my brothers, this was the final family number I needed to block. Marcus, the man I had been dating for a few months, joined me for dinner that evening. He knew my tale, knew about the betrayal and the consequences. He had never hurried or pushed, simply pay attention and comprehend. He leaned across the table and held my hand after I updated him on the most recent family happenings. "You're not always born into a family. It depends on who you select." I returned his grip while reflecting about my brother's support, Marcus's understanding of me, and the life I had created for myself. Ultimately, my family had not been taken by Sarah. She just assisted me in determining which elements were valuable. "This weekend, my brothers are coming over," I informed him. Do you want to come along?" His smile was sufficient response, and I was genuinely content with who I was and where I was for the first time in a long time. I no longer cared about the drama unfolding at my parents' house. I had my own happiness to preserve, my own family to raise, and my own life to enjoy.